The National Film and Video Foundation is an agency of the Department of Arts and Culture that was created with the sole purpose to ignite stories of the South African film industry. It's a story about nurturing uniquely South African narratives through the funding of the development, production, marketing and distribution of films, festival hosting, market and festivals attendance, as well as the training and development of aspiring filmmakers. Our story is about igniting your stories, and we will continue to do so for as long as South Africans have stories to tell. In the past financial year, our story moved in leaps and bounds as we pursued transformation and development across all spheres of the industry. Our training department's achievements include 127 bursaries awarded to deserving students. Through our partnership with MICT CETA, 120 interns placed, 3 training companies funded, 60 filmmakers participated in the SEDIBA program, 12 film students participated in the mentorship program. Through our mentorship program, 2 filmmakers had an opportunity to work on a BET production in Toronto. 621 learners were reached through the school's program. The production and development of content is key to our business. In the previous financial year, 81 projects were funded in development, 48 in production, 1 slate funded for female filmmakers, youth filmmakers. The NFVF commissioned 4 special projects, 1 to commemorate Nelson Mandela's centenary, 2 towards the advancement of our culture and heritage, and 1 co-production incentive with the Canada Media Fund. Our efforts to create sustainable companies continues through the slate project that we fund, such as the 3 fiction slates, 1 animation and 1 documentary slate. For co-productions, 8 projects were certified, 4 for advanced ruling and 4 for final ruling. We hosted 2 co-production forums in partnership with the Department of Trade and Industry and the South African Consulate in Canada. The marketing and distribution report for 2017-2018 financial year is noteworthy with the following achievements. 12 festival grants awarded to national festivals covering 8 of our 9 provinces. 13 festival activations, 99 filmmakers funded to attend local and international markets and film festivals. 3 public screenings and the We Are Africa Film Festival. 7 awareness and industry events hosted. Activated at 8 international festivals for global positioning. Attended 4 strategic markets to promote proudly South African content. 4 brand activations and 4 communications campaigns implemented per quarter. These resulted in an overall increase in applications. 10 marketing and distribution grants awarded. 16 stakeholder engagements hosted during the financial year. The NFVF launched its VOD platform, samb.net, and all South African filmmakers are encouraged to submit their content on the platform. The South African Film and Television Awards, SAFTA's, brand continues to grow, and this is evident in the 30% increase in viewership. Policy and research. 5 research publications published, 4 quarterly monitoring reports produced, and 2 policy and legislative submissions with recommendations submitted. The 2017-2018 year saw much growth in our film industry. We will continue to play a leading role in addressing the needs of our stakeholders and the broader film community. Our focus towards the growth of youth and women in the industry has yielded positive results through partnerships with various provinces, strategic entities, and community interventions. The National Film and Video Foundation remains committed to fueling the industry. We congratulate all the South Africans who have received both local and international accolades. We assure the industry that we will continually adhere to our duty of implementing strategic priorities with integrity, working towards improving the quality of life for every South African while promoting equality, all through the power of the visual medium.
we're being hosted by the National Film Video Foundation, and we're talking about marketing and distribution. We've got some of the best in the business who will be helping us understand what filmmakers need to think about as they create their films and what they need to think about even before they create the films. Today we're being hosted by the Successful Product Video Foundation, and talking about before we get going and start on the nitty-gritty business of marketing and distribution, I just want to say welcome to our panel, and also just allow them to tell us a little bit about themselves and what their part is in marketing and distribution and how they are part of the NFVF funding panel. I'm going to start with you, Mfundo. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you come into this conversation?
Thank you, Ayanda, and welcome everybody. My name is Mfundo Nsibande. I'm a marketer, been in marketing for the past 18 years. My experience ranges from broadcasting, print, business, etc. So I've cut my teeth in this game. I currently chair the panel of marketing and distribution for the NFVF for the past year. And yeah, that's my introduction.
Thank you so much for that, Mfundo. Diane, do you just want to take us through who you are and what your role is?
Yes, I'm Diane Hay. I'm the Project Marketing Manager for Events and Strategic Planning at New Metro Cinemas. I've also been in this industry from distribution to acquisition to content management, and now found myself in the very exciting world of marketing. And yeah, that's my intro.
Thank you so much, Diane. Mayenzeke, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you entered this conversation? You muted, Maye.
Okay, thank you for that, Asanda, and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Mayenzeke Baza. I am the head of distribution and financing at AAA Entertainment. We are a sales and distribution company, been in the business for almost 8 years now as a distribution company, but before that, been producing and directing content. Of course, yes, I am part of the NFVF distribution panel, and yeah, that's it actually from my side.
Thank you so much for that. And Helen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you entered this conversation?
Yes, my name is Helen Kuhn. I head up a boutique distributor called Indigenous Film Distribution and Development. We've recently entered the whole development arena as well to get projects from paper to screen. But we are particularly focused on local content. Our focus is this territory, not necessarily international, although it happens sometimes. And we often work with AAA as far as the international distribution is concerned. So we do cinema release, then onto pay-per-view, then onto television. DVD is kind of a non-starter these days, and TV obviously incorporates pay TV and free TV. For Africa in particular, we've done been around since 2009. We've done just over 110 films to date, particularly from South Africa and some from the continent.
Thank you so much for that, Helen. We now go to Eugene. Eugene, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you entered this conversation?
Thank you, Asanda, and good afternoon to everybody joining us on Facebook Live and also on YouTube. My name is Eugene K. Mametze. I am a marketing and communication specialist. I've been in this communication space for close to over 10 years in marketing as well. I am a filmmaker also. I'm very passionate about stories. I'm very passionate about culture and the preservation of South African culture, basically. I'm also a co-founder of Second Class Communications. I work on strategic communication solutions, across the board. And in the last couple of years, I've worked with some of the filmmakers in crafting, strategies, communication strategies, for them. I've also, assisted them obviously in terms of, sponsorship, and just to bring also to their film. And yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much for those intros, guys, and helping us to get a sense of who's in the room and what the specific expertise of each person is. We're going to start off now by asking the question of what is the importance of filmmakers identifying their target audience and identifying the kind of genre that they're going to go into before they do anything else? We'll start that question off with Eugene, if you can start us off, please. Eugene, you are on mute. Eugene,
Thanks,
you
Asana,
are
for the
on
question.
mute.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Thanks for the question. You know, for me, for each and every filmmaker to start thinking about, you know, target audiences, you know, etc. You know, filmmakers need to look at themselves as business people. You cannot, in today's age, you know, talk about it's just only about the labor of love. It's really it's about, you know, the business. It's about, you know, engaging distributors. It's about, you know, understanding your communication strategy. It's about, you know, how do you understand your positioning as well. So, you know, with target audiences, you know, you obviously have to look at your story and what is it exactly what you want to communicate to people. So if I'm releasing a rom-com, you know, a romantic comedy, you know, for instance, I need to be able to understand exactly, am I talking to females? And if I'm talking to females, what type of female am I talking to? I cannot just be broader, you know, in a sense. I need to be specific in terms of, you know, how do I segment this female audience? You know, I need to understand what they like, you know, what their interests are, you know, what their expectations and what are the behaviors also. So I need to actually get into the mind of a target audience, you know, before I even start developing, you know, the story. So a lot of the mistakes sometimes that filmmakers make is that along the way in the process, you know, one starts to think about, oh, who are my target audiences? And my colleagues will also attest to this, that sometimes they sit down with filmmakers and they discover that a lot of them, they've just produced or, you know, or developed the stories, you know, without necessarily understand exactly who am I making the film for. So for me, it's very imperative that, you know, you understand, you know, the demographic, you know, of the people that you want to talk to. And then also you understand also the psychographics of that person. Without not understanding that, then it's a problem, you know, for you as a filmmaker.
Thank you for that, Eugene. Mayenzeke, do you have a perspective on that? And also, I think I want to ask you, as a filmmaker yourself, doesn't that somehow take away from the creativity if you now have to think about who this film is for before you get to the actual story? Because, you know, creative thinking doesn't start in a business sense. It starts with the story. It starts with an idea. So how do you do that in a way that allows you to still be within your creativity?
Yeah, I mean, the tricky part, I hardly call myself a filmmaker because I'm purely a businessman. You know, for me, I think, yes, I come from a background where, as a creative, when I was directing documentaries, you know, I was making projects that, or content that I knew needed to be told. You know, there's always that section where from actually creatives where, depending on the genre that you are creating or on the format that you're making, you know, purely, I can say, if you're making documentaries, it's always a difficult proposition because hardly there's any commercial viability when it comes to documentaries. When I mean that is once off, but if you're doing docu-series, and then it's all, I mean, the factual space is much more vast. It's not limited to documentaries per se or feature-length documentaries. But I mean, to echo what Eugene is saying, it's always difficult, like any other industry, to create a product you don't know where it's going to go to. Imagine if you just woke up one day that you're going to make these shoes. You don't know what size shoes you're going to be making, what color shoes are going to be, who's going to be buying this type of shoes, and who actually. So I think I always look at, even in the film industry, in the same way, that if I'm creating a property, there needs to be some sort of an audience or someone who's going to consume it. Of course, there's always the discussion around creativity. Is if I want to tell a story, I'm going to tell it regardless what other people say. Then you must know you're not going to make money. You see, this is always the what I call the juggle you have to make. If you are adamant in terms of telling your product, you must know the difficulties of you earning revenue are going to be high because you're not basing it on a market or on a specific audience. But again, I can't say that's always the rule. Sometimes people have something they feel strongly about, and I might not agree as someone who's a sales agent or distributor, but then the product turns out great and it finds a market. But those chances are always rare. But the chances of success for those who first think of their audience or who first think of their market are always much higher than those who don't. So I think it's a juggle where you have to first realize what you're creating for. Are you wanting to earn revenue from it, or are you just wanting to make it because you want to make it? So if you are making it because you want to earn revenue, you have to first think of the audience, because it's the audience who's going to either pay or consume whatever you create. So I think to what Eugene is saying, it's very important to actually think of who you're creating for. Even if you're creating for a grandmother at home, still an audience, right? So they have to like it. So I think it's a juggle. It's all about, you always have to consider your audience. And that impacts in terms of how you finance the property and who comes on board to help you make that property that you're creating. So if you are looking for financing somewhere, but you want to create and you're adamant, you want to tell your story, it's always going to be difficult because you have to allow other people to input, because to recoup someone's investment is all based on the target on a market. So I think it's always a tricky part, but as a businessman, I always lean towards first find your audience and your market before you can create.
Helen, would you say you agree with this, working with filmmakers and finding those unique South African stories that I'm sure sometimes surprise in terms of how they perform in the market? Has this been your experience, and would you say it's a thing that filmmakers should take seriously, and how?
Yes, as a start off, or as a starting point, I agree with everything that Manzeki and Eugene have said. What I would add to that is that there is an audience for every single story and every single film. The tricky part is really to manage the expectations around the size of that audience and where you are likely to find that audience, because you may find a greater number of people wanting to engage, spend their time and money on watching a romantic comedy or an action, if I'm talking about feature films in particular, in a cinema environment, and across the board in other platforms. But if you have a drama that may be culturally relevant, really well made, could win endless numbers of awards, and be the kind of film that we may, as a country, put forward for the Oscar submission in a given year, the size of the audience for that kind of film may be smaller in a cinema space and bigger on ancillary platforms. And then a lot of this is also, filmmaking is starting to interject into television, especially on the high end limited series basis, or even the longer running series that have more than one, whatever, Ozark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's a great overlap that's happening between talent working in film and talent working in that kind of television environment. And if you look at the documentary world, or the non-fiction world, there you've got success stories that pipe up. As Manzeki said, I think we all know the story of the Tiger King. Who would have thought that anybody would watch a bunch of, trashy Americans running around in cowboy hats, fighting over big cats? But these things happen. So why I'm raising that example in a non-fiction or a fiction example is content isn't an accurate science. It's not a prediction that any of us could wake up in the morning and guarantee that if you make a certain kind of story for a certain kind of market, you're going to deliver most definitely 5 million views around the world. If there was such a science and such a formula, somebody would have figured it out by now, and everybody that works in the film industry would have been, racing around on yachts. That's not the case. The public is fickle. Even when you try and segment your audience, to that example, if you have a female biased property, which age group, which psychographic, which background, is it urban, is it peri-urban, is it, how long is a piece of string? If you have a female biased film, it can appeal to so many segments, and there's no such thing as one film that appeals to absolutely every female on the face of the planet. So it's a risky business. You try and negate all these risks in the planning based on comparators, based on the success stories of your peers. The best thing you can do for yourself is to watch as much content as you possibly can, because you may very well find that the films, the series, the docus you like best, depending on your own taste, may not be the ones that's hitting that popular ping when it's out on a screen. So the starting point is know the content that's around you. You know, South African filmmakers are often guilty of that. Watch each other's films, whether you love it or hate it, it doesn't matter. And then consider the numbers that those films delivered once they were out there. Then you start having some pieces that you can use to put your puzzles together and to try and build a matrix that will give you an idea of how likely you are to convince the audience that you are aiming to deliver your film to. And, you know, this is the burning point, is creativity is such a complex and spectacular ability to have, but the harsh, cold light of day reality that meets creativity in the middle when an audience interacts with it is you may do everything right and you may win 100 awards and 10 people may watch your film. So it's like a long-term focus. You've got to, I think any filmmaker will tell you, if you're in it for life. It's like an addiction. You're never going to get rid of it. You can go to rehab. Every time you make a film, you're going to rehab for 2 years afterwards. And then you survive it, and then you go back and you make another film. So you can put all the pieces in place. The business part is there, but it just isn't a 1+1 environment under all circumstances. You've got to, you know, develop that thick skin that will make you survive the swings and roundabouts of fickle audience responses. That's why we have surprises. Films shoot the lights out that nobody ever thought would.
Sure. Those are some hard realities, and they lead very nicely into my next question, which is, at which stage after I've thought about my target market and I've thought about my genre, do I now approach a sales agent? Is it after I've written the script and I'm ready to go? Or is it before I've written it and finalized my concept? And I think any of you on the panel can take that one.
Yeah, maybe I could start. I mean, since I'm a sales agent, right? So I think it's always, I mean, it's always a tricky part. We've always advised people that you want to come in early, depending on the needs of your project. The earlier you can bring the property to us, the better it is for the project. But again, we are in a market which is South Africa, right? Which really doesn't have this sort of a practice. So you end up becoming the only sales agent, and it's difficult to make your reference just from one sales agent, you know, and say, okay, cool. It makes sense to go to big, because then I'll have almost every filmmaker coming to me, right? Which I won't have the time to look at each and every project. It's going to be difficult. Of course, sales agents are global players, you know, people who look whether the property can work not only for the specific market you are creating for, that it could work for other markets outside your territory. Often the projects that come up specifically out of South Africa are always very, very local. Of course, in the recent months or in this recent year, we're starting to see new projects that tend to have a much global appeal, but still to a limited degree. And also, it's always been difficult to benchmark how these projects do in the global space. We can't ignore the fact there's only one global platform that we're working with, right, at the moment, where maybe we can take statistics from by looking at what they put on their platform, which is only Netflix, because there's no other global platform just from here. You can't even see our South African project on Amazon, another global platform. None of the local players are global. So sales agents, as I said, because they are global players, it's always difficult, right? You know, to say to people, come to me with your property now. And I've said to people, come in early, and I get bombarded by synopses and projects which I know they're never going to go anywhere. So, but again, the right rule is, if you can find a sales agent early on into your projects, they might help you to start shaping it for a specific market. So the way sales agents work, we work like estate agents. So if you want a house, you go to the estate agent because they're going to get you the best house and they make the right fee. But also they know all houses, they know almost everyone what's happening. They can help you find the right bank, to bond your house. They always know exactly what's happening. So it's always advisable to come to us at an early stage. I've, in the recent years we've worked with, I've seen projects at script phase. I've seen some projects which are already finished. The difficulty, again, where most people, when they come, whether to distribution or agent at a later stage, is they create this property. Even if it's good, you can't deliver because there's certain things you have to think of before, you finish your project, whether in post-production, which we call deliverables. Let's say you want to sell your film that you thought is amazing to the USA, and everything is finished, but then you don't have E&O insurance. Or you want to sell it to some French-speaking market or some Portuguese market, but you don't have M&Es. So all the deliverables that the sales agent or distributor will advise you upfront to think of, even if they're not going to be involved in your project, but they start making you to think about how you can prepare your project for a much wider audience. So I will say it's advisable to come in as early as possible. But I'm saying this thing, I'm not saying come to me because there's many other sales agents you can find globally. But again, because in South Africa, we are limited to maybe one or few, I would say try as much as to go to a sales agent early in your development as possible.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Thank you for that, Maya. You're going to be getting a lot of emails. I hope you have your email address ready. Any other thoughts from anybody on the panel around the sales agent question, or do you think it's been sufficiently answered?
It has, but I'd like to add one thing to what Manzeki is saying.
Yeah.
Is the reason why I think a sales agent or someone that lives in a world where we're trying to, as distributors and sales agents, exhibitors, broadcasters, connect audiences to content, is if you take it to any of these entities early on, you're in a better position to gather information about market data than what you may be when you're researching it just by yourself on the internet or asking your friends. Sometimes the worst thing you can do is to show your friends your film once you've made it at your home, and 5 or 6 people watch it and they think, oh, it's fantastic, but it's actually charming to them that you're a creative, so it's very difficult to extract the truth about that screening from people that may know you personally. So the reason to go to sales agents or distributors or whoever you can reach out to as a filmmaker early on in the process is to gather information, and then the choice is still yours whether you're actually going to apply that information or not. Because sometimes a particular filmmaker just has a gut about a certain story. The odds seem to be stacked against the story, but they make it and it's a big success. Other times it goes according to the norm or the trend. Certain stories tend to work, certain stories tend to find smaller markets. But it's very hard to make that case to yourself or to a funder if you didn't gather that information. Any funder is going to ask you for references or information packs, whatever they want to call it, from people that work in the delivering content to audience space all the time. So the earlier the better, and the key reason to gather information, and then it's up to you whether you use the information or not, whether you apply it or not, because all the power still ultimately sits with you as the creative.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's a very important proviso that this is advice and that you should think about taking it, but that you can go with your creative gut. Because I know a lot of stories of filmmakers who have been told all kinds of interesting things, and their products have actually gone the opposite direction and been successful. And of course, there are those who were told to fix things that they didn't fix, and then those were the things that became their pitfalls. So thanks for that proviso. Now, my second question really is, we're living in this very interesting time of COVID-19. It's completely derailed some projects. It's completely delayed some projects. And at the same time, it's also been a boon for some projects who, for example, may never have gotten on Netflix, but now suddenly there because Netflix needs all the content that it can get because it's not able to feed, the beast that is people who are on lockdown, sitting at home with nothing better to do in some instances than watch, some TV. What do you think is the opportunity that COVID-19 presents us? And what do you think are the challenges that COVID-19 presents us in the film space? And how can people in the film space take advantage take advantage of the opportunities, but also figure out how to manage some of the challenges that it raises? And I want to start with you, Diane, on that question.
Yes, you would start with the cinema person who's been closed down for as long as we have. Yes, the challenges definitely, are quite obvious. If you're involved in the cinema industry, it has been incredibly difficult time. We can't open our doors as yet. We're hoping this is going to change in the very, very near future. And I think for a feature film in particular, that, how cinema operates, we can also see that, the content even from the US and from the UK and Europe has all just stopped and started to find alternate platforms that they could potentially release on, because it's very difficult if you have a release schedule and something like COVID hits, everything gets delayed and gets pushed back and gets pushed back. And it gets to a point eventually where the independent studios, the big studios have to make a business decision and decide, can we afford to hold back any longer, or are we going to simply not release on a cinema platform and go straight to other platforms? So for us in particular, COVID has definitely been more of a challenge and an obstacle than anything else. I think during this time, the most important thing for all of us is to try and stay engaged with our customers and tell them that, we're not gone. We're just simply sitting back a little bit. But the big thing, I think, is always to remember that what COVID is definitely doing is showing us the platforms clearly, the value of each platform. And as filmmakers and creatives, we need to understand that in particular. Studios make films for cinema. That's why you have 4-story screens and 4K laser projection and all of that. You cannot replace that on a home entertainment screen at all. So we've learned very valuable lessons during this time, and we just hope to open really, really soon, which we will.
Thank you for that. Another sobering thought. I'm hoping, Vundo, you're going to give me some positive news, maybe around the opportunities that exist, because we like to think that it has to be, some kind of silver lining somewhere. So please give me some good news.
The upside, I think, is the increase in eyeballs, because of the alternative platforms. And the upside is that because people are mostly at home, so they get to consume a lot of entertainment to also distract from what is happening out there. Also, the opportunity, I think, for filmmakers is forget about the normal. This is the new normal in terms of distribution. New platforms are created, and also understanding the value chain is that the value chain has been disrupted to very effectively because of the alternative platforms. And which also means it's good for broadcasters. It's good for platform owners as well, because then we're going to have a lot of content that we never used to see before, because they were either waiting to first go to cinema and then only come to a platform like television and linear television, that is. So now the opportunity is you can skip certain channels and now go straight into the viewers, which is to your previous question as well. I think for us, especially as a panel, the discussion we've always had was the successes of certain films versus others is similar, in a sense of the silver lining is when do you start engaging broadcasters, cinemas, in terms of the product that you want to develop. A lot of people come at the end and you see a product that's been a film that's going to be launched next week and it's only being advertised a week before. So it doesn't even have enough traction to hold into the market. However, the upside of COVID is we now are forced, from consumers and everybody else, we are forced to rethink, relook at how we consume, and also the taste. You know, I now can consume what I feel at my own convenient times. I don't have to wait for something to be first available. So that is also changing in terms of the consumer behavior. What time do we consume and etc. Because before, because we're so busy with the 9 to 5, that you only be watching cinema or entertainment largely on weekends. But now it's a Monday to Sunday type of a thing. So which means we need more content. We need more local content to be produced. And we need those content that never made it to cinema to now be available to other platforms and broadcasters as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think that's a very interesting point you make there about, you know, this value chain disruption and how suddenly everybody needs content, and suddenly maybe movies that had been written off could get a second lease on life. And I'd like you, Eugene, to come in there and just take us a little bit through your thoughts on this value chain disruption and what you're seeing that's happening and where the opportunities are for filmmakers.
Thanks, Asanda. I mean, like Mfundo says, I mean, there's a disruption obviously happening, you know, currently, and you know, filmmakers have to, you know, step up to these opportunities. I mean, what we've seen also in the last couple of months, I mean, we've seen filmmakers also, you know, linking with online platforms to, you know, release, you know, their content. We've seen big events also, you know, taking a very hybrid approach, you know, of television and online platforms to communicate messages to audiences. And the nice thing about it is that audiences are now more receptive because they are at home. So you've got a very captive audiences that is saying to you that I'm available. You know, you can actually continue, you know, bringing content over to me. So definitely also with the digital space, I mean, the advent of digital in the last couple of years has also evolved. So you'd find that there are now platforms, you know, for that filmmakers can actually utilize, you know, to drive, you know, their content, you know, to find an audiences that is actually waiting. So if I'm a filmmaker and I don't have a brand profile online, it's a problem already. You know, if I'm a filmmaker, I'm only just creating just for the fun of it, then it's not actually helping you as a business person. So you also have to make sure that, you know, audiences that are there, they also know you as to who you are as well. So there's quite a lot of platforms. We're very excited that, you know, one can actually access content, you know, either I'm mobile, you know, or I'm at home, you know, or different platforms. But, you know, like Diane said also, the feature film business is really, really about cinema. So cinema is still also a platform, you know, for people, you know, to continue consuming this content. So we shouldn't actually discard that and just look only at opportunities that are online and say this is where I'm zooming in. So, and also because I've had through, you know, some conversation that, you know, people are now streaming their content only specifically for online market, you know. So we also have to think that there are also other platforms also that we can, you know, that we can actually take our content to. So it's quite exciting that, you know, there are platforms online also that, you know, one can actually zoom in into over and above, you know, the VOD platforms.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, and I hope that the people who have visions of being filmmakers or who have already started the journey are listening and taking notes on some of the opportunities that you're highlighting. I want to come to you now, Helen. You probably had paid lots of money for lots of films that were gonna come and were gonna be delivered, and you're probably sitting with some that have been delayed or that may not be delivered because of COVID. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you're able to manage or deal with such a catastrophe in a lot of ways?
I think at least in the distribution space, it's very normal to be dealing with all the platforms, like we cased it right up front. You know, we'll be working with exhibitors when something goes out theatrically, with the broadcasters when we're selling to TV, the ASVOD and the TVOD platforms when it's going on to those platforms. So as a distributor, your arena to deliver content to people or our arena to deliver content to people has always been confined only by the number of platforms that exist. The films, to go to that point of what Eugene is saying, is what COVID has done to an extent is it's changed the creative community's opinion of the credibility of an online platform. Because I think we all agree that cinema is obviously, in an ideal world, the best place to. You can never really compare lights going down, you know, a communal experience where you're watching something on a huge screen with any other particular offering. So it's also the romantic offering, especially when you have a film that is not.
Helen, I think we're losing Helen there for a little bit. I'll go to you, Mayenzeke, and just talk a little bit about what Helen had started talking about. What do you think? Yes, we lost you a little bit, Helen, and we're now going to be moving, sorry, to Mayenzeke. We'll come back to you again.
No problem.
Mayenzeke, can you just tell us a little bit about, you know, what you're seeing and what the impact of COVID-19 has been on some of your projects, particularly, I think, from a cost perspective, because even if shooting goes ahead, the cost of shooting right now is much higher than it was before the lockdown, much higher than it was before we even knew of this pandemic. Can you take us through that and just explain how COVID-19 changes things, I think, particularly from a financial perspective?
Yeah. Maybe, I mean, just to quickly chat about, just to add to what Helen said, you know, as a sales and a distribution company, there's always been the good about COVID-19, and there's always been the disadvantage about COVID-19 in terms of the industry as a whole. You know, we work with multiple platforms, and then when one platform is not COVID safe, we move to the other one that's more COVID safe. And this brings opportunities. I think what has changed actually globally, it has made the creative sector to understand that you don't depend on one platform, but at the same time, you have to try and restructure your production processes. You know, I think more and more people who depended on shooting outside will have become, of course, a disadvantage. And the pandemic is not going to stop. It's still going to go on for the next 2 years for all we know, right? You know, if you look at what happened with the Spanish flu, we're probably going to go into the second phase of this pandemic. No one knows. So I think for the next 2 years, the way we do business will change completely. Yes, there are people who are shooting now and have to put in extra cost just to keep within the COVID safety protocol. But it's still very risky because that people will shoot this, will get infected, and then they'll have to stop production for 2 weeks again just to cover that. So it's still very difficult. I think people are trying to take chances. But from the perspective of distribution, the opportunities that existed is that if you have a right property that works for other platforms, then you are winning, because then you quickly go into the next platform. I think also it's changed the windowing around distribution. Normally, traditionally, we have cinema, from cinema to pay TV to VOD or free-to-air later. But now things are changing quickly. The free-to-air broadcasters maybe are willing to pay more now because they get what's called first run or more premium content. Pay TV, maybe they could maybe pay more. But again, you must understand, our economy has also shrunk. So even though it's an opportunity, we won't get bigger monies, regardless whether it's premium content or not. The other thing that we see in our business is that as much as there's lots of opportunities now to start flooding all these platforms that are looking for content, South Africans we're not creating enough content anyway, you know? So there's no content available out there. And whatever content was available were either owned by the broadcasters. So the creative sector doesn't own any content. Even if you went back to the South African sector and said, give me what you have, none of the stuff they have, they own it. They probably will have licensed it to another platform already. No one owns any assets in terms of this industry. The films, let's say in the feature film sector, even the films that now maybe are in need on the VOD space, let's say Netflix wants stuff, it's not available for the continent of Africa because it's either in the library to another pay TV channel, or it's either it's too old, or even it doesn't even work. I mean, because the content we're creating, again, this comes back to our first question. All platforms aren't just gonna take whatever is available. I mean, audiences aren't stupid, right? They know when it's something old and they know when it's something that's not great. So even though there's stuff that's available, it doesn't necessarily mean it's just SABC is gonna buy it, because your content might just not be great or might not be what audiences want to see. You can flood it as much as you can, but people are just not gonna watch it. Whether, same as Netflix is not gonna just take whatever you created. You know, they have to first service their premium audience that wants specific audience. It will be the same thing as multi-choice. So is this, COVID-19 has opened, but the disadvantage of COVID-19, and I can see throughout the industry, you know, lots of people are suffering because they're not going into production. The problem in our creative sector is all based on production revenue. You know, people want to create something, regardless whether it goes where or not. They couldn't really care, right? They just want to create, because when you create, you make a producer fee, a director fee, or that fee. No one really think of what you could do afterwards. I think now it's shifting people's perspective that if actually I own the right assets, now I'll be making money. I mean, we as a global sales company, right? I mean, Helen Kuhn can attest, we get calls almost every time. I'm doing a deal with North America now. They wanting diverse content. Now, diversity has become a big norm, right? Because people realizing diversity, Black or disabled people, more and more people need to start watching that content, but it doesn't exist. They come to Africa and say, can you give us content that, I said, no one owns anything. Or even if they own it, it's not gonna work for your audience because it's not great. So I think that's where we need to start thinking about owning or financing things differently, or also making content that works for everyone. And again, I'm not saying you have to make big budget films. Story is story, right? If you're making a beautiful story, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, it will resonate with the audience. If it's a love story, the love story that is great will work. But a love story that you make for your grandmother at home, it's not gonna work for someone else who doesn't have the same grandmother as yours. So all I'm saying is there's opportunities that exist, right? But the disadvantage is that as a creative sector, especially in South Africa, we have this sense of, it's not but we've got this thing where we think what we have already should be bought. But what we have already doesn't necessarily that it works for the current platforms. So I think it's kind of shifting how people look at it. Yes, I do think, as I say, in terms of production, there are people now who are wanting to, you know, to start creating content, but they have as well as those with related costs, and which actually pushes up the budget a bit. But it's what we have to live with anyway. Unfortunately, you know, for the next 2 years, you have to think like that. Cinema might come back into action, you know, Diane can tell you about that, but it's still, no one knows what's gonna happen in February or March, whether we're gonna get a vaccine or not. So as a creator, we still have to really relook at how we are doing things going forward.
I just want to add something to what you're saying, Mainzeki, about quality, because I do fear that the wave of optimism around the streaming platforms, or what people seem to perceive to be the endless list of online platforms where they can place their content, is being overrated. The thing you raise about quality is very important. Just because people are staying at home more doesn't mean that a streaming platform will simply pick up or buy anything that's available simply because it exists. That's not the case. If we're talking about, you know, whether you're talking about Iroko in Nigeria, whether you're talking about Netflix worldwide, or for Africa, whether you're talking about DSTV box office, or I mean, we can list the smaller and the bigger ones around the world. You deal with more of them than we do. But we're not in a place, as much as there's more places to take content to, where a content streaming platform will simply take something just because it exists. They still assess it. It still has to meet the benchmark of quality and, you know, be in focus and have the split tracks like you mentioned, and have, you know, errors and omission insurance. It has to have an HD master. It's got to have subtitles separate from the film. All of that stuff is a reality. And then beyond that, the story is the story. If it doesn't convince, if it's badly executed, just because it exists, doesn't mean someone's going to pay for it. You can put it for free on YouTube just because it exists, because then it doesn't cost anybody anything. But if you want to be earning revenue from licensing it, there's no way of getting around it. The fact that the content is going into the world now means that more than ever, you're competing with your content with every other indie guy in the whole of the world, not just with, you know, it's not a Cape Town versus Joburg production industry standoff anymore. It's now the guy that made a film in Iceland, someone that made one in Brazil, someone that made one in Switzerland or in the Dominican Republic or Jamaica. You're right up against each other. And if you can't stand next to those women and men that create content shoulder to shoulder, your piece of content won't make it onto the Jamaican online platform if it's not good enough. You know, there's a big difference between paying for content and content just simply being available for free.
Yeah, that's a very sobering part of the conversation, which I think takes us very nicely into the next part of the conversation, where I want us to talk about, you know, you've told us all these difficult things that need to happen. What can people do in terms of thinking about potential funders, and how do people even find, you know, potential funders beyond someone like the NFVF?
Okay.
So this is an open one. Anybody can take this question.
That's
okay. Yeah. Well, I'll only let me start. I think it's always, South Africa is very sport, right? You know, we have, unlike many other parts, let's say in the continent, where there is freely available money, which is, most of it you don't have to recoup. We have the NFVF, we have the Department of Trade and Industry, and we might have some small legal financing there from the Gauteng Film Commission, KZN Film Commission. All these, like, really what's called grant funding is in numbers. Now, the issue is that people, even though that is available, right, they're not creating the properties to make themselves sustainable. Now, if we were to take any of those things out, there'd be no money available for the industry, right? Because commercially viable industry, let's say like the North America, is only purely based on distribution. Now, if you as a South African, you were to compare yourself against any other markets, you know, Uzbekistan, you know, who knows where Uzbekistan is, right? Do you know how they create content? No one really knows, and no one really cares, right? Whether there's Uzbekistan or not. What we care is, if I see a film on Netflix and someone were to tell me that it's from Uzbekistan, I'll be shocked, right? I'll just be watching whatever that content is. But my point is, if we're creating commercially viable properties, when I said commercially viable, a property that anyone can put money on and see a return on investment on it, then we'll start shaping as an industry. I think we're not there yet, right? But with what is available in terms of free, what's called grants or government financing, we need to use it to the utmost, so that it helps us to create properties that can help us generate, to make more and more and more properties. So all it is at the moment, if you don't go to the NFVF or you don't go to the KZN Film Commission, it's difficult for people to go to the bank. You know, we have a bank, again, that is very gracious, called the IDC in South Africa. But the IDC, they're a good bank because FNB won't give you the same, they won't look at you the same way as IDC will look at in terms of this industry. Because as much as IDC is a bank, they still do not take they don't ask for your collateral. So they don't take your house, you know, when you go to them. You don't put your house as a is guaranteed. Whereas if okay, some of us don't have houses, but you don't have any collateral to be able to say this is a guarantee. Where if you go into a normal bank, a commercial bank, you need to be able to have some assets to show. So I think the difficulty or the question again is, if there's no NFVF or if there's no DTI or if there's not the industry, for me, in my opinion, will probably crumble completely. So while we have what is available, let's try and make whatever we can commercially viable to generate revenue for ourselves.
And also build businesses. You know, Eugene, go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Mayezek. But also, you know, the other thing as well, we need to change perceptions, especially like, you know, with filmmakers, is that, you know, NFVF or your KZN is the only platform also where I'm able to actually access funding. You are creative. And I think also as creative people, you need to actually conscientize people who consume your content. And these are marketers, these are corporates actually that are saying that we are ready, we are willing to actually assist and actually support and fund films or stories. So filmmakers also have to find different ways of how do I engage and interact with the corporate funder, because there are there over and above, you know, the grants, you know, your NFVF of this world. You also need to, you know, collaborate as well. You know, I mean, we're talking about the global audiences. So we need to collaborate also with other filmmakers, you know, other film agencies around the world. So we cannot, the NFVF can only fit as much. You know, we sit down with a particular budget of marketing, for instance, and sometimes it's very, very difficult to actually make a decision in terms of, you know, do we give this much to this person or so. So there's so little, you know, to support a plethora of stories in this country. So I suggest sometimes, you know, when I sit down with filmmakers, that you need to actually invest in a strategist, you know, somebody who can actually look into your film, you know, from the outside, not the creative, but from the business perspective, that if I had to go and approach a Coca-Cola, what is the return on investment for them to actually invest in the stories? You know, I mean, overseas, you have a very large conglomerates who invest in arts and culture properties day in and day out. Why in this country are we not conscientizing the corporate, you know, people? You know, so, and slowly, if we start actually, you know, conscientizing them, slowly we are able to actually drive stories. We are able to actually change the narrative that, you know, cinema is only for a select type of people. You know, we are actually now broadening content, because now we'll be able to have support, you know, of the corporate market, and people are really about brands, you know. So I think for me, my input is that it's key for somebody to actually invest in a business manager, or let your producer actually drive the process. You know, that as much as you are actually going to NFVF for funding, but also look outside the box. You know, look at I mean, you have like the USA Embassy. I mean, they also fund, you know, cultural platforms. You know, you have other people, so many people actually who can actually fund. So the thing is that we have to change that mind thinking. We have to definitely change it, because otherwise we're gonna have like so many young graduates coming from you know, film institution, and going the same route of, let me start at KZN, let me start at whatever. These agencies are there definitely to support, you know, the film culture in this country, but they can take as much. So that's my point, that, you know, we need to also engage the corporate government, and also conscientize people also about the importance of story, the importance of restoration of our stories in this country.
When I wanted to add or say, and also Eugene, is I do find it interesting that through all the ages and centuries across all the continents around the whole world, arts and culture has been funded by a particular segment of society, whether it's royalty, whether it's governments, whether it's corporates. There seems to be something wrong with the human condition all around the world, that all kinds of arts cannot successfully get to a point where all kinds of arts are commercially successful. So that for me is like casing the statement. Then the second thing is, if you're engaged in businesses that focus on arts and culture, you know, it's still a business that focuses on arts and culture. So like any other business, you need to have more than one project on the go. If you are a creative, you can make your business sustainable. If you do some advertising work, some brand work, as Eugene is saying, some television work for a particular broadcaster, a film, then it means that you're opening up the potential of funding opportunities to wider than just the government agencies. And we are particularly lucky in South Africa. That is absolutely the truth, that we have so many places to go to where funding can be raised that is non-recoupable or grant money to be able to tell these stories with. But I think in the world of culture and art, it's always going to be that way. There's always going to be places, certain kinds of funding that goes into projects because it's about arts and culture. You know, it's not sport, it's arts and culture. It will always need that. But if you can make your business sustainable as a creative by applying your skills to a number of disciplines in your field, then across your various projects, you will be able to run a business that is commercially viable. I mean, I have to use Burnt Onion as an example, right? Because it is seriously single. That's on Netflix right now. It's the first South African film that's gone worldwide straight to Netflix exclusively, 190 countries. I mean, Catching Feelings was the one that broke the barrier for all of us.
Yeah.
But they did it a little bit differently. They did 6 weeks in cinema and then went to Netflix. Equally did really well. But if you look at a company like that as an example, they have a slate of projects that they're working on. That is television, advertising, feature film, reality, you know, and you can't do it alone. To think that you can start your own business, do it all by yourself. Day and night, you're going to do everything yourself. That's impossible. Just leave it. Don't even try. So if you understand that you're going to have to collaborate with people that you trust, and you're going to have to diversify, apply your skills to various disciplines in your field, you can be sustainable. You will be able to raise money. You can run a business, but you can't pin a business on one film or one short film or one TV program. That, you know, that's more of a creative ego thing. So I think any producer that has survived in this industry for some time will tell you that you don't survive off the back of one film in every 3 years. It's impossible. Nowhere in the world can you do that.
Yeah. I mean, to what you're saying, Helen, is that we've become individualistic, right? Just as a society, I do believe that there are people who will have that one project, but we have to create an industry where you have enough companies that have this slate of projects that these individuals can fit into, right? And we have to create an industry that distribution is understood for what it is, right? At the moment, we still think Helen Kuhn has got her own selection of people that she likes. Diane doesn't like me. Mayenzeke has got issues with me. But this is not how the industry, you know, I mean, to what Helen, even if you look at Hollywood, right? When Hollywood started, it was a grant-based system. You know, the American government put in money so that it gets them. But now it's become a massive distribution business that it's purely on what the market works. There are, of course, miss and hits in Hollywood. And oftentimes I see the South African industry always compare themselves to content that comes out of Hollywood. You can't do that. You can't compare. If you want to compare yourself to that market, then you have to be able to follow the steps that led to them creating that property. Even if you compare yourself against France or Germany, you know, NFVF has got all these co-production treaties with all these 8 countries. But if you go to those countries, they have a heavily funded grant system that have way more budget than South Africa for sure. So we have to try and find like a system that works for our market. And at the same time, look at how the other markets are doing it in order to be able to make it better. But at the end of the day, like what Helen said is, if I'm a farmer and I farm pigs, and then when there's swine flu, they're all dead, then I'm not a farmer, right? So I gotta be able to do cabbage, spinach, potatoes, things that will be bringing money to me on a daily basis, because people will always be eating chips. It doesn't matter which restaurant you go to, there's always gonna be potato chips, right? There's always gonna be broccoli, there's always gonna be carrot. So as a farmer, you need that as a stable meal to keep your lights going. You can't say, no, I'm doing pigs or I'm doing beef. And then when there's a swine flu or when there's a cow something disease, your business dies. So it's the same thing as in the industry. So if you are making feature films, try as much, do wedding videos, film some funerals. Now, if you film funerals, this would be the best time for you. You'll be making a lot of money. So all I'm saying is you have to kind of think differently as a creative so that you tackle the bread and butter issues. Unfortunately, we all have to have lights on. We all have to eat. We all have bills, some bills to pay. So you can't be only specifically just making that one film.
Yeah, I feel like you just crushed a whole lot of people's dreams there. Like I'm touched right now with my film visions that you've just crushed heavily. Thank you for that. Diane, can you come in and give us some hope, please, for funding and how we should be approaching potentially?
Well, I think really, you know, Helen, Mayenzeka, Eugene have all really touched on it. We have a fantastic funding body through government initiatives, through banking type initiatives, through corporates. There definitely is opportunity to find funding. You've got to jump through quite a few hoops and you've got to go through quite a bit of red tape, but truthfully, I believe that is the way it should be. I think if we look at how long we've had these opportunities to access funding, I'm pretty heartbroken and disappointed that we're still battling to break through, especially on the local content, to break through and see some of those fantastic box office numbers that we should be seeing in light of all this funding and opportunity that we have. So immediately I go back to, it's all about the content. It's all about understanding your market. It's about watching each other's films. Helen alluded to that earlier. There is not enough, in my opinion, there are not enough filmmakers and creatives that are actually watching and looking and researching on the business of film, understanding it. It's not about waking up one morning or spending 3 months.
Diane, I think we've just lost Diane. Are you back?
Am I back?
Yeah, we just lost you for a little bit.
Sorry about that.
Were you still, yeah?
So basically what I'm saying, you know, I don't want to repeat what everybody else is saying, but I want to stress the fact that if you look at the funding opportunities that we have, I'm expecting filmmakers to really start coming up with the content, start writing scripts. Let's not have a situation ever again where we're sitting and the cinema doors are closed and we're looking at other online platforms and we've got no content. We should be quadrupling the amount of films we're making. The money is there, but the stories just aren't. The writing isn't there, and we need to really focus on that a little bit harder. I think if COVID has done anything, it's taught us we need to be making more content.
Yeah, thank you for that. Very many sobering thoughts. I'm sure, Mfundo, you're going to add to it as well.
Yeah, I just want to bring a bit of hope into the situation, which is, I think the opportunity here is that we need to monetize the industry from inception of ideas to storytelling to creative to producing. When I say monetize the industry needs to be commercially viable enough so that we can start attracting commercial sponsors and partners into the business of making films. I've seen a model from the UK when the NFVF did a partnership with BFI last year, where you'd have filmmakers come into a room and sitting with venture capitalist firms and pitching, having a producer to pitch a film or a project or a documentary from inception, and having a partner that forces you to think ROI, what is the return on investment, and what am I hoping to achieve with this film from a consumer point of view. And also remember, it's not only about telling the nice stories, films also shape society. So also having to understand where are we in society, what are we trying to drive, even from an opportunity from a tourism point of view. How do I make a film and partner with the Western Cape tourism? Because this film will be shot in Cape Town and will show the attraction of Cape Town and the beauty of it. So all those ideas, and I think it's been tried many a times, but we've yet to find a perfect model in this country even abroad, to say, how do we bring the corporates into this? How do we show them there's value? I mean, there's opportunities like product placement when you're making movies. You know, put that iPhone there and then approach iPhone, that's Samsung's phone, etc. Which I've seen in a lot of our movies, we're starting to do that now. So we need to be very innovative and literally not only think about government funding, because that also limits us, because if a movie does not perform well, there's no repercussions. You don't have to pay anything, you know. However, if we start bringing corporate partners into the value chain in the beginning as well, and also monetizing the industry, understanding the commercial value of the industry, because it is a business at the end of the day. This is not nothing for free. So whoever buys the film, whoever goes to the cinema pays their money, whoever sits at home and pays subscription every month or a TV license, it's a business. So somebody in the value chain is making money. But guess what? It's the people who own the value chain that are making the money. But the creatives who are creating the content are not seeing the money. And also, I think to summarize what everybody is saying, is that content is still king. You can never get that wrong. If your content does not resonate with audiences, you can have the best film and your friends can like it. However, if it does not talk to the core audiences, forget it. So content is still king.
Yeah. You know, just a quick one, Asan, I know you want to close. I was going to say, we have a semi-commercial industry, right? Because, I mean, some of these films that Helen mentioned, they had partly funding from the bank. You know, the IDC is the bank that is looking at return investment and has been financing quite a lot of projects in South Africa. So our industry, to a certain degree, can do show that is commercially viable. So it all depends on the property that's being created. At the same time, I think as creatives, if you're getting, I mean, especially for the Black filmmakers, right? If you're getting 50% rebate from the DTI, that should be your equity to a certain degree. And again, I mean, I'm bringing this as a way because when people go and negotiate deals and with other partners, with broadcasters, they forget that they've got that as a way to be able to hold some equity, to be able to exploit even further. It's a discussion that needs to be had, but people take that as if it's not necessary to them. So all I'm saying is we do have a commercially viable industry to a certain degree because the companies that Helen Kuhn had mentioned, they are running commercially and they are tapping into the bank. And of course, just like Hollywood, or just like not all of us are gonna be running sustainable businesses. Unfortunately, that's just how it is, right? But those who are making it and doing it should be able to collaborate with the rest. So if you are someone who are starting in the industry or who are wanting to make your first film, I would say, don't go and try to make the first big feature film. Go make short films, hone your skill, make sure that you can create the right property just from starting with short films. So again, I think we must not underestimate the fact that we have banks, we have private equity, we have private money that already exists in South Africa as we speak. It's whether we are creating the right property for those investors.
Okay, thank you for that, because I was actually gonna come to you about Black filmmakers and the lack of money and the lack of funding and the lack of everything that people are currently facing at the moment. But I think we're gonna come back. There's a couple of things that I still want us to unpack a little bit later. So maybe you could think about them a little bit at the back of your mind. But I want us to start with the questions. But the key things that I want us to unpack a little bit is this idea of using the grant funding and the other kind of funding that's available as equity when you go into partnerships with big firms. How does that work? How do people do that? It's this idea of speaking to commercial partners and commercial entities and seeing how they can be your partners. How would that work and how would you suggest that goes? And I think also, for me, it's also homework for the NFVF, that maybe the NFVF needs to have another workshop, and even beyond the workshop, maybe the NFVF needs to be creating these partnerships so that people aren't trying to do this work themselves individually without necessarily the big name support that the NFVF and other entities can provide. So I'd like us now to go to some of the questions, but I want you guys to have those questions that I want us to come back to at a little bit later stage at the back of your mind. So some of the questions that have been asked, and there's so many, I have to sort of try and go back to the beginning because we've been going on for like just over an hour and 20 minutes. So what people want to know is, I'll tell you as soon as I get to the questions. So one of the first questions we got was, in terms of genre, when can filmmakers tap into thrillers and horrors, etc., and still be commercial? So I think we'll take 3 questions, and then I'll come back to hear your responses to it. And then another question that came through said, sorry. What if you want to shoot a motion picture, then you go look for funding? The funding institutions want you to have a deal with a distributor before they fund you. So that's a question. I think the question is, how do we bridge that gap? So if you want to shoot a motion picture, you look for funding, the funding institution wants you to have a deal with a distributor already before they fund you. Should you be bridging that gap? Should you just be going to a distributor, or is there a way to do that? I think that's the question. And then how do filmmakers, say in the private sector, get more exposure on the films they've made and on the films that may not necessarily be produced by government bodies? So I think this question will tap into what you had spoken about earlier, Mayenzeke, which is that people don't own their content. So there's content and we should be tapping into it, but because people don't own it, we're not able to fully take advantage of this current moment of COVID and everybody looking for content, and particularly looking for diverse content. So I don't know if you want to take us through those questions, and then I'll say, Maye, we'll come to you with that question, but let's start with Mfundo and Eugene, taking us through some of those questions. You can pick any of the 2 that I've just spoken to.
If I remember the questions, just help me out there, Asanda, if I forgot anything. But to talk about the bridging the gap between funding, a funder, and wanting you to have a deal with the platform, we've seen that. Yes, we've seen that even with the applications that we seem to get as a panel, is that when we look for the marketing plan, because the marketing and distribution plan is for us to give you funds to help you get the film to the eyeballs of the consumer, either be it cinema or etc. All we ever want to see is you understanding the value chain, which is the first thing, to understand that your film needs to go through certain processes, number 1. Number 2, you might not have a finalized deal, but you might have a platform or a distributor that is already interested into your project, that shows the viability of your project, that somebody else in the value chain believes in your project. So that is what we look for most of the time. And what we tend to see is that the description or the marketing plan around distribution tends to be very vague, where there's so much focus on, for example, only for cinema, or at that time you don't have even an agreement with any of the cinema companies. However, somebody wants money, but they don't show that they've gone through the process of engaging a distributor, they've gone through a process of understanding the value chain for their films. So I think for me, it's key that happens. And we do encourage people as well that when they apply for funding, if there's a certain MOU they've signed, there's a certain agreement in writing to say there is a interest from a distributor or from a platform rather, that they attach that into the application. It makes the application strong, because even from the NFVF side, we then see the value, and we see also that this project has hope to see the light of day. So I'll take that question, and then I think Eugene will take the second one.
Yes, Eugene, you can take the other question.
I think your next question was talking about genre, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
It's genre. I think, for me, I'm not a writer, but I think if I'm
so it was about genre, and particularly horror, and its potential for commercialization in South Africa.
All right. The thriller and I think horror genres are very audience specific, in this country. You have a particular audiences that have appetite, for that. And I know for a fact that we had a particular film actually not so long ago, and I mean they understood exactly who they were actually talking to, and you can actually tell from the submission that this person is familiar with the genre space. So you cannot actually write for genre and you don't really know much about, I mean, the horror space. So one, you obviously have to have appetite. Number two, you also have to be skilled and watch also, various directors and writers also into that specific space, because then also it gives you accolades, for people who are obviously, reviewing your submission, that, you understand exactly who you are actually talking to. And also when it comes to marketing, you also have to understand your position. I cannot have a horror genre and decide to advertise on SABC One. So your marketing plan has to make sense also, that, I've studied, these audiences, with horror, for instance, it is a particular audiences that you're talking to, it's more of like a cult type of following that you have. So you also have to look into those platforms. I also just want to add on in terms of funding, was that Helen releases quite a lot of films, and most of the films, they become like quite a success, at box office. So collaborative approach is needed there. Those filmmakers, how do they get it right? So then to also have a conversation with up and coming filmmakers, that they've managed to go a different route in terms of funding. They've gone through a commercial route, for instance. What is it that is needed, for them to be able to apply for that funding, for them to actually develop those stories? So the other things that it's a collaborative approach, and unity as well, because you'd find that there's particular, you find that, I'm going to be specific, Afrikaans content, especially feature films in cinema, they work. Why do they work? And you'd find that some Afrikaans filmmakers, they don't necessarily go the route of arts and culture, but they go through the route of your corporate, your private, your venture capitalists. Where do they go? So if I'm an up and coming filmmaker or an established filmmaker, I need to also collaborate with them. I need to actually understand their strategy. What is it that actually works for them? How did it work? And if I've got the right story, can I go to that particular funder, for capital? So I think, the conversation has to keep on, it has to happen all the time, and I'm glad that we have Helen here, because she has access also to these people. So it has to be a much broader conversation, with all the filmmakers. So that was like, I was just sitting on in terms of funding.
Yeah, I mean, probably not, but I think what I wanted to say, in terms of genres, we know globally some of the biggest genres that work is thrillers, is horrors, is action, and sci-fi. So these are big global genres, because genres they're like an addiction. Horror audiences, they're addicted to horror. They just want to watch horror after horror after horror after horror. Unfortunately, in South Africa, we don't have much of an addiction when it comes to these genres. But again, they vary differently, right? And I think if you look at cinema, Jordan Peele's film, how they did, I think Diane and Helen can chip into that. But I didn't watch that film. It's not my favorite. But more and more, if you look at, I think Netflix bought a horror film called 8, which went into the global platform, which did very well. It was for Africa, and it really performed well in terms of the local market. So, but these genres are still very difficult, from the South African perspective, because I just don't like, most South Africans don't like to be scared, and most Africans really don't like to be scared. But more and more, you're starting to have a niche, and start to have people who are actually in love with these genres. Firstly, for cinema, it was always difficult, but now on the VOD platform, maybe people, when they watch it at home, they do get to enjoy it. So I mean, I don't know whether when can South African filmmakers start making these? I think it's all depend on the creative. But I can tell you globally, these are the genres that tend to work. I'm not the person for them because I don't really deal with horrors. You might have to start finding distribution companies or sales companies that specifically deals with these genres. The question about motion picture and fund institutions, why do you need distribution? You know, when you go to an investor and you want them to put money into you, they're always going to want to know how they're going to get their money back. And this has become a norm. I mean, we get flooded with people asking for letters of distribution to submit to NFVF or DTR to someone else. And the people that come, they don't understand why they're asking it. You know, this is kind of the question that says, how do we bridge the gap? You don't bridge the gap. You have to go through the process. I mean, if you want money from someone, they have to have a guarantee that they can get their money back. And I think, you know, your last question around exposure, say, how do filmmakers in the private sector get exposure in the films, right? I think if you independently produce your film and without government funding, it's okay. But then you still need to go find distribution regardless anyway, you know, for people to know where they can find your film. Distributors are the ones who work with platforms to get your film to. So it's regardless whether the film is funded by government or it's funded by private sector, there's no discrimination. Distributors don't discriminate. They don't care whether you funded from your own pocket or you got money from government. Distribution is distribution. So rather find a distributor, you know, or exhibitor. There's Helen, there's Diane. Go to them.
Just something else that you say that's very important, Diane, and then you can, I'm sure you want to say the same thing, is audiences also don't care about funding. They only care about what's on the screen. So whether you got the money from your dad or you found it in a treasure or you got it from government or a bank, it's all the same. You're taking 2 hours of their time or 20 minutes of their time or whatever, and their time next to their money is what's most important for them. So if there's no way, if you want to make your film independently and you're going to get it to market yourself, that's absolutely fine. But then you can't take someone else's money and expect them to just believe everything you're telling them. It's like any industry. There is a value chain for a reason. None of us know everything. We all only know, it's very collaborative. We only know a little piece. But if we line all our little pieces up collectively, we can at least give input with regards to that little piece, that the money that is around, the money that does get invested, comes back, that you can make the next one and the next one. So if these structures, you know, no money comes with no conditions. If a funding body asks you for some kind of indication that your film will go to market, you should be able to give it. Otherwise, you can't get the money. It's no one else is going to give you money. You know, if you want to build a factory and make garden chairs, you're going to have to do a deal with Macro or someone to get the chairs sold, or open your own shop. Otherwise, no one's going to give you money to make the chairs. It's exactly the same. It's no different to any other product, unfortunately, even though it may require more skill than the next product. But maybe it doesn't. Maybe we're just caught in our own bubble.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, everyone. Diane, I'm sure you want to also contribute something to the conversation.
I'm going to be quick because everybody's touched on all of it. The thing is, I also just want to remind you, when it comes to genres, especially on a platform that is very strictly monitored, as in a cinema platform, where we have to have FPB regulations and all of that sort of thing. Just by saying the word horror, you can imagine an age restriction. So if you're thinking about making films and wanting to, the ideal film to make is something that it opens up your audience base. So if you look at the top performing films in cinema, it was Lion King, which had a PG. It was the likes of Black Panther. It's not talking to horrors and thrillers and high action with high age restriction. Just remember that as a back, age restriction plays a very, very key role in being able to get it to access to lots of eyeballs, as Mfundi says.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm now gonna take you through the next round of questions, and there's a number of them which are focused on sales agents. So the biggest question is, since you said you're not even available, Mayenzeke, really, because you're the only one and you don't want everybody sending your numbers. People are asking, where can they find out who are the sales agents in South Africa and regionally and internationally? And then another question is, how can they check for the numbers for the genre? And I think, Diane, you might be able to answer this, I'm assuming. And then there's also some questions around, so I'm just trying to remember some of the question. So yeah, they're looking for sales agents, and then they also want to understand, maybe if you just take us through what are the different platforms. It's online, it's cinema, it's et cetera, and then maybe do advantages and disadvantages of each. I think that might help people a little bit. We'll start with those. So sales agents, where can they be found? Locally, internationally, regionally? And then the question around genre numbers, how do you know, where can we find out what genres sell in South Africa, what genres don't, and sort of what are the numbers? And then the other question is, maybe somebody who can take us through the different platforms that are available and what are the advantages and disadvantages of each platform. And then I think we'll take it to the next round after that.
Okay. Maybe Helen, do you wanna start it?
Yes, let's give Helen a chance.
So I think the thing is, just with numbers, it's very tough to find numbers for VOD, SVOD in particular. You're never going to find numbers for it. Belongs to that entity, whether it's Showmax or Netflix or whatever. It is their company. They keep their numbers as their data. But you can find numbers for cinema performances and for pay-per-view downloads and DVD sales in the old. But DVDs, like, really, just forget about DVD. It's gone. So the best place to look is the Internet Movie Database. Really, if you subscribe to that on the IMDb profile, there's endless amounts of information. If you're looking for information that you don't have to subscribe to, you can also look at Box Office Mojo, and it breaks it up by country, the cinema performances and the films that released. But the thing is, to try and find what you're looking for, you need to know the comparative films. So you're going to have to do some research, which is going to take you back to Internet Movie Database first. And the thing about the horror thriller is absolutely true. In cinema, horror, with or without age restriction, is a very tiny genre here in South Africa. But on the SVOD platforms and on the pay-per-view platforms, horror in the world, if you make it according to the formula, because there's like 12 subcategories of horror, you're most likely to succeed. 8 has done really well, like Mayenzeke said. And there's one coming through from Dark Matter as well, that Ink made, that looks like it's going to do really well based on the materials. It's really the numbers, I think, that I could contribute to here, where to find it. The sales agents is really more your thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Before we go to you, Maya, can we just give Diane a chance to talk about the different platforms? And you can focus on cinema particularly, and what the advantages and disadvantages are, because that was one of the questions that was asked. And then I'll come to Maya.
Okay, yeah. With regards to genres and that, and where to find the numbers, especially for cinema, Helen has alluded to already where you can get that. I also think it's a nice thing that we should be looking at as the NFVF panel to make that accessible, those sales agent contacts and distributor contacts, and potentially, even if we do it monthly, we will look at trying to put up some numbers on the website, so that everybody can use that website as a central point. The questions with regards to cinema and the various other platforms. Cinema is probably one of your most expensive platforms to release on. It comes at a relatively high cost with regards to the deliverables. That is very important to bear in mind. But that's why you're looking at studios and independent that are making films that have the quality requirements for a cinema, because a cinema is just that. It's large screen formats, it's motion, it's your average cinema size, your screen size in a cinema can take, I think we worked it out, it's almost 2,500 of your 84-inch TVs in one screen. So you can imagine it's bigger, it's better. So from that point of view, we've discussed already how the platforms have changed, how the windows have been squashed. Without cinema, content is getting out there, it's not stopping it. However, the cinema platform is also normally a platform that gives you a bit of a boost and an indicator from a sales point of view. Obviously, the higher your performances in cinema and your box office takings is, often helps the negotiators, the distributors and the sales agents be able to negotiate better deals for your content, obviously when it reaches phenomenal box office levels. So cinema is an important contributor, but it is definitely not the only one. And that is very important to remember. And again, from a genre point of view, you come to cinema and you're prepared to pay the cinema ticket price. You're not sitting at home in your lounge. So the point of that is to make sure that you escape. If you want to escape into a love story, if you want a girls' night out, if you want to catch what's happening in the Marvel or the DC brands because it's so super action and sci-fi and all of that, that is why the cinema is there. It's an escapism. You get to disappear for an hour or two, and that is why we make films. That is why we have cinema, and that is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, May.
So I think, just to add to what Diana, so the guys can help me. I don't know other sales agents, right, in South Africa, per se, I do know maybe, I don't know if Brendan Carley is a sales agent, you guys can help me out. It's difficult to know. I know lots of distributors, but I don't know many sales agents. If they do exist, just maybe they're out there. But I do know that maybe myself, Brendan from Gravel Road, also does do sales. And mostly sales agents are global players. So you don't become a sales agent for a territory. As a sales agent, you look at global rights and you exploit each right depending on the needs of the territory that you're selling to. Like as a sales agent, I can work with Helen Kuhn here as a local distributor, or sometimes she works as a global distributor, but I work closely with her because she understands the African market for sure. And with Helen, maybe I may not do cinema, but Helen might do cinema. So the sales agent, I seek to exploit your rights globally. And the rights are exploited on multiple platforms. Firstly, the first platform that people often go for is cinema, which is where red carpet, luxury, bourgeois, all the nice things are in cinema, right? Big screen. Then the next platform they go for is television. Now, television is segmented into three parts. You get paid TV, free to air, or probably those are the two. You have paid TV and free to air, right? Which is another smartly bigger screen than what you get as your SVOD or VOD platform or OTT. Now you have then OTT platforms, which are your VOD platforms. And by those OTT platforms could also mean box office, which is what multi-choice offers, which is like a TVOD platform. It's not necessarily like a SVOD, but it's a TVOD platform, but it's within the OTT space. And then you have airlines in flight. Those are because you can make a lot of money in flight. And then you have hotels, you might have bars, you might have restaurants. There's all these different platforms that you can exploit your property in. Again, depending on the content, which platform it works for. That's what sales agents will look at. They might say, okay, for this feature film, it's not going to go to cinema, it's a straight to television, or it's a straight to VOD. The disadvantages and the advantages of this platform, they vary based on your needs. So if the SVOD platform wants exclusivity and they're going to pay more money rather than you going to cinema or going to pay television, as a sales agent, I make the decision based on the needs of one, of the content creator, as well of the remuneration that's going to come from, or revenue that will come from that specific platform. At the same time, as a sales agent, you can window the different platforms and say, okay, cool, in-flight can happen at the same time as SVOD. So it's all, I mean, there's all these different platforms, as I mentioned, but so that's our job as sales agents. We are global players. We don't specifically focus on one territory. And like I said, I'm not sure of how many are here in South Africa, but globally, there's lots of them. How do you access them? If you go, like as Helen mentioned, if you go to IMDb, you search for sales agent, you'll find lots of them. And also you'll be able to find what firms they've represented and what genres they represented. It's just all it is. You just have to do a lot of internet searching. It's difficult now to say I'm going to find them here. Normally, you will go to markets where you have one-on-one conversations with sales agents because they often go there. You can go to their stands, you can go to their exhibition spaces, you can meet them. In this COVID-19, there is no physical markets. There are virtual markets that are popping up, but they are also difficult to work on. You know, we had Marché du Fond, which was a virtual market, very difficult. I think more and more, I think markets will get better. I know the one that's run by IFTA, which is FM, is also going virtual. So it's a big market where you get lots of sales agents from all over. It's going to go virtual. So that's where you can find sales agents, search online. And yeah, I think that's basically the real deal. You know, it's difficult for a sales agent to exploit rights they do not have. Now, if you go to a sales agent, already rights taken from you, it makes it difficult for them to do their job. Hence, it's always better, as I said, to go to them first, then you can break down the rights depending on the territory. But when you go to them later, it makes it difficult. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it answers a number of the questions. I don't know if Eugene Mfundo, do you have anything you want to add to this round as well?
I think the colleagues have summarized it quite nicely, especially about the question about the platforms and the advantages and disadvantages and which platforms are there. I think the only thing that even why today we're having this discussion is the distribution channels have been disrupted. That is a fact. And if we look at what happened to print, for example, as a platform, a media platform, in the past few months, and the titles that were closed forced a lot of print publications to go online. So which means new opportunities are opening in that front. We're seeing the DVD market, it's dead, actually doesn't exist anymore. So once again, it opens up another market, which means where do we grow from here? Because also we can't rely on the few online VODs that are available. So where do we grow our markets? Or do we create one as South Africans? Because I think that's an opportunity now to say, let's have a VOD platforms where we can get all these films, documentaries being available. Because the main important thing before COVID happened, the challenges we've always had as a country, we made movies, but our movies did not perform well in the cinemas. And the excuse that we would have was that we don't have enough bums on seats. However, you see other genres that are doing well. So now that problem has been, in a way, been answered by saying, how do we create other platforms for filmmakers to have their products in there? I think that the opportunity also lies in, I think Eugene also mentioned about collaborations and also looking at what has worked and understanding the market, reading the room, understanding the environment and the industry. So I think just to summarize there, that's basically it in terms of the value chain and the advantages of each of them and opportunities that are opening up, because it's not the end of the road. And even cinema is forcing itself to innovate. You know, even free-to-air TV is forcing itself to innovate. So everybody is innovating and creating more platforms and alternative platforms. However, the danger is that we must not be boggled into the old model of doing things. You know, now we need to be very flexible in terms of getting our products to the market.
Yeah,
that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Just to add a quick one there, Asanda, without stopping you, just to be specific, again, in terms of the platforms that exist. So you have cinemas, which you have new metro cinemas, you have state cinemas, you have independent cinemas. Then you have television, which is pay TV, which is multi-choice, or what's known DSTV with Mnet, and DSTV has got BET in there. And you have free-to-air television. Another pay TV is what's called Star Times. I think I forgot what it used to be called before, StarSet now. And then you have free-to-air, which is SABC and ETV. Those are free-to-air channels. Then you have all these OTT platforms, these SVOD platforms is Netflix, Showmax, VIU. It's called View, right? So these are the ones I can name in terms of where, from South African perspective, you can access. If there's anyone that I'm missing, you can, but there's not many, and these are the ones that more will probably pay for content, rather. Anyone that I don't mention is probably I haven't dealt with, or there's probably no money to be made. You might have local, it's called community television station like Soweto, or any other station, maybe in Mandela Bay Television. I'm not sure in terms of whether they pay for content, but they can definitely showcase your property. Just so I thought I'd give you that specific details in terms of what platforms exist.
Let me just add on as well. I think we also recommend, filmmakers, if they do have, other platforms that work within their communities, they should actually reach out to each other, or, to the NFVF, and actually just advise that these are opportunities that they actually utilizing. And I'm saying this because in Limpopo, you have some particular filmmakers, who have outdoor screenings, or they actually still utilize the DVD platform. You remember, I think my colleagues will actually remember. So as much as we say that the DVD is dead, but there are also other platforms that filmmakers that they know of. So they should actually just collaborate and reach out to each other in terms of other platforms that do have potential for revenue. Thanks, Asanda.
Okay. So I think that we're almost towards the end of our panel. So what I'd like you guys to focus on as we wrap up. So essentially, give your summary, your conclusion, anything you've just thought of that you would like, the people at home to consider or to think about as they're putting together their films. But also just explain a little bit, because it came up in quite a number of the questions. Can you just explain a little bit about the marketing and distribution plan? What is it? What should be in it? How should people approach it? And how much weight you give it when you are looking at funding proposals and funding plans? And then anything, I think also that you are the people that focus on these, you are the people that basically deal with these applications. What are the biggest mistakes that you see, and how can people avoid those? So we'll take it from, I'll call the people out by name, and we'll go that way. So we'll start with you, Mfundo, and then we'll go around to you, Diane, and then I'll tell you who's speaking.
Thanks, Asanda. What to look for when applying for marketing and distribution is, first of all, we interrogate your plan, your marketing plan or your strategy of the how. How do you plan to get it from A to B? The second thing, we look at your marketing items. So within your marketing plan, we look, for example, have you considered PR? PR is a cost to hire a PR company or a person, for example, to make sure that pre-release of the movie, there's some PR that happens. What platforms do you want to advertise the movie on? We spoke about how movies sometimes get advertised very late, and then which platforms are being used. Incorrect platforms are being used, for example. Show us also the launch, how you plan to launch the movie. Is it a cinema launch? Do you plan to have an event? And also the line items from a marketing point of view to a distribution. Have you considered the cost that comes with that? So that's the basic that we look at. Obviously, we interrogate the plan. Where we've seen shortfalls, I think a big tip going forward is people then put line items that have less to do with marketing and distribution. So for example, people are putting, paying for, make an example, human resources, salaries, bill, included in that. We're not saying that we're not going to pay salaries, but that should be on a certain, either a production budget or etc. So be careful of the line items and specify which line items that you want us to fund you for. But the most important thing, your plan needs to be simple enough for us to be able to understand it, to say we can understand where you want to go, we understand your strategy, your objective, and how you want to obviously market the movie. And then what we've also been impressed lately by is innovation. Show us how innovative, how you want to do this project different from the next person, and how innovative are you in terms of the project that you're applying for. So for example, somebody might decide to do a launch in the township and do it at a school, for example, and just have school kids being bussed into a cinema to watch the movie, etc. So we look for innovation, and my colleagues will add into other things as well. So I'll leave it there for now. And then I don't know if you want me to close just to summarize, because we don't have much time as well.
Yeah, just a few words, yeah.
Yeah, I think going forward, I think what we would like to see, like I can't stress this enough, that it is not business as usual. Our new normal has changed. Consumers, the COVID has hit us from the pockets to the way we behave and the way we do things. And the type of content that we'll still like to see. Content is still king. We still need to produce quality content. We still need to get the content to the people, because I'm also not for exclusive platforms, but I'm for inclusive platforms that exposes and that gets down to the roots of all the provinces and the roots of all the people in the country, in terms of opening the channels that gets us that far. And lastly is innovate. Innovation in this age is everything in how we do things going forward. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hey, Diane, any thoughts? 30 seconds for the next people.
Again, with regard to the applications, Mfundo has definitely highlighted, if you can, you applying for marketing and distribution funding, by this time you should have your film complete. If we can see something of your film, be it a trailer, ideally the entire film, obviously on a safe link, that also helps determine the application. The second thing I've written down here quickly, it is for first-time filmmakers or content providers, having a distributor or sales agent on board is also really, really helpful. We work with everybody, and it just helps us understand that you understand the business of your film. And finally, and the last thing I just want to say, comparators, watch each other's films, look at the trends, look at what's happening, get as much information as possible. And welcome. We can't wait to see you in cinema very soon.
Thank you very much, Diane. I'm sure everybody's excited and can't wait to figure out how to do cinema under COVID conditions. Eugene, you want to tell us a little bit about what you're thinking, or anything that may have been missed by your colleagues around the applications, but also just any wrapping up thoughts?
I think what's key, is in particular to marketing, is that, I would, advise, filmmakers to have, marketing or PR specialists also, when we submit, your submission, because they would actually understand in terms of, either the conventional style, of campaigning, or the non-conventional style. Because we look at this, so you cannot just say, I want to have TV, radio, etc. You obviously need to show, innovation. I mean, Mfundo spoke about, product placement, on television. What type of content is that you can actually link into an existing show, for instance, to drive awareness, to actually invite audiences. With radio as well, you can just invest into promotional radio spots, but then also find creative ways, of making people talk about your film in the radio space. Same thing with print. Print, we've seen, a lot of print titles closing shop in this country. So now they've moved over to, to digital platforms. What do you do within those platforms? Also, It's about promotional partners. We get enticed if you've taken the initiative also of involving also some of the the leading FMCG brands also to your story. So it shows also that you're creative, and also you can actually leverage from their brand. And the nice thing about it, I mean, you look at Disney titles, they have like very strong promotional partners normally when they have releases that are coming. Again, with your PR and publicity plan, make sure that your film is built as a brand. If you have like leading actors on your campaign, utilize them. That I'll be utilizing this person. I'll also dovetail to their social media platforms. I will be collaborating
Sorry, Jean, I have to cut you short. We actually have run out of time. I don't know if Helen or Mayenzeke, you just want to give literally last word as we step out.
I just have one word for everybody. Collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Do not do the Lone Ranger thing.
Thank you. Mayenzeke?
I think, I just want to thank the NFVF for putting this session together. I think we can't underestimate the need for conversation. So I think the more conversations we have, the better it is. So thank you, NF, for putting it together.
Okay, thank you so much to you guys for giving us your time and to allowing me to grill you and put you in the hot seat for a little bit. Really appreciate that. And thank you, of course, to NFVF for bringing us all together. And I hope that everybody has found some interesting ways that they're now going to do their films. I hope that dreams were not crushed, but rather that dreams were actualized and were given wings, and that you learned a little bit about the business and the industry of filmmaking and how you can make it work for yourself and how you can deliver better applications and how you can deliver applications that have a higher chance of being successful in the market. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
The National Film and Video Foundation is an agency of the Department of Arts and Culture that was created with the sole purpose to ignite stories of the South African film industry. It's a story about nurturing uniquely South African narratives through the funding of the development, production, marketing and distribution of films, festival hosting, market and festivals attendance, as well as the training and development of aspiring filmmakers. Our story is about igniting your stories, and we will continue to do so for as long as South Africans have stories to tell. In the past financial year, our story moved in leaps and bounds as we pursued transformation and development across all spheres of the industry. Our training department's achievements include 127 bursaries awarded to deserving students. Through our partnership with MICT CETA, 120 interns placed, 3 training companies funded, 60 filmmakers participated in the SEDIBA program, 12 film students participated in the mentorship program. Through our mentorship program, 2 filmmakers had an opportunity to work on a BET production in Toronto. 621 learners were reached through the school's program. The production and development of content is key to our business. In the previous financial year, 81 projects were funded in development, 48 in production, 1 slate funded for female filmmakers, youth filmmakers. The NFVF commissioned 4 special projects, 1 to commemorate Nelson Mandela's centenary, 2 towards the advancement of our culture and heritage, and 1 co-production incentive with the Canada Media Fund. Our efforts to create sustainable companies continues through the slate project that we fund, such as the 3 fiction slates, 1 animation and 1 documentary slate. For co-productions, 8 projects were certified, 4 for advanced ruling and 4 for final ruling. We hosted 2 co-production forums in partnership with the Department of Trade and Industry and the South African Consulate in Canada. The Marketing and Distribution Report for 2017-2018 financial year is noteworthy with the following achievements. 12 festival grants awarded to national festivals covering 8 of our 9 provinces. 13 festival activations, 99 filmmakers funded to attend local and international markets and film festivals. 3 public screenings and the We Are Africa Film Festival. 7 awareness and industry events hosted. Activated at 8 international festivals for global positioning. Attended 4 strategic markets to promote proudly South African content. 4 brand activations and 4 communications campaigns implemented per quarter. These resulted in an overall increase in applications. 10 marketing and distribution grants awarded. 16 stakeholder engagements hosted during the financial year. The NFVF launched its VOD platform, samb.net, and all South African filmmakers are encouraged to submit their content on the platform. The South African Film and Television Awards, SAFTA's, brand continues to grow, and this is evident in the 30% increase in viewership. Policy and research. 5 research publications published, 4 quarterly monitoring reports produced, and 2 policy and legislative submissions with recommendations submitted. The 2017-2018 year saw much growth in our film industry. We will continue to play a leading role in addressing the needs of our stakeholders and the broader film community. Our focus towards the growth of youth and women in the industry has yielded positive results through partnerships with various provinces, strategic entities, and community interventions. The National Film and Video Foundation remains committed to fueling the industry. We congratulate all the South Africans who have received both local and international accolades. We assure the industry that we will continually adhere to our duty of implementing strategic priorities with integrity, working towards improving the quality of life for every South African while promoting equality, all through the power of the visual medium.